Hi everyone, it's Professor Vanbenthuysen. I just wanted to make a quick video to kind of give you and walk you through our course because we have a late start date, unusual start date of a Tuesday, so we miss our first class meeting together. So this is BSC 2086 and it is a lab course. It's a hybrid course. So here's the syllabus here. I'm just going to run through it quickly. It's a 1-credit class. This is our reference number. We meet on Mondays. There's our location, and our meeting time is from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. The last day to drop this class is actually before our first meeting. So it's this Saturday, January 11th, and our first meeting is on Monday, January 13th. You can still withdraw from this course all the way up to March 23rd. So brief course description is basically it's a continuation of BSC 2085L, where we cover the remaining organ systems that we did not cover in AMP1. So the cardiovascular, immune, respiratory, endocrine, digestive, urinary, and reproductive systems. We do use, because it is a hybrid course, we will be using a lot of online resources just for time purposes. So there are links to several online histology atlases. There are some for dissection materials just in case we are unable to finish everything during our meeting time. There are no required materials for this course. I have written the lab manuals myself, so you don't need to purchase anything other than a lab coat. If you took a hybrid or a face-to-face lab previously, you should have a lab coat from that. So you need to have a lab coat. You need to wear long pants, long sleeve shirts, and have closed-toed shoes on when you come to our first lab meeting. Grading scale is your standard grading scale. 90 to 100% is an A, and so on and so forth. When we get closer to the end of the semester, I'll explain to you what happens if you have like an 89.4, which is not listed within my grading scale here. So there's 2 grading categories for this lab course. We have lab exams that are worth 70%, and then you have lab assignments, which are worth 30%. The lab exams, you have 4 lab exams worth 100 points each, and you have a cumulative final, which is 100 points each. These are paper exams taken during our meeting time. You do not need a Scantron for it. So there's 5 total exams with the final. At the end of the semester, I drop your lowest exam. So if you take the first 4 lab exams and you have 100 on all 4, or not 100, I'm sorry. If you have an A in the class after you take all 4 lab exams, you do not need to take the cumulative final. A 0 will go in. And then after the cumulative final testing date, you'll see me implement the drop grade where it will drop that 0 for the cumulative final. So everything else that's not a lab exam that we do in this class falls within the lab assignment grading category. So what the bulk of this is are you completing the labs and submitting the labs. There are 18 different labs and 2 different lab reports. The labs are not really long. Some of them are longer than others. So depending on how long it takes is going to determine the point value for that particular lab itself. So they do vary. Both of the lab reports are worth 50 points, but again, it falls within your lab assignment grading category. Attendance is mandatory. Because of us having a Monday class, we miss the Monday of the first week of classes. We also miss a Monday because of Martin Luther King Day. We also miss a Monday because of the Strawberry Festival. So we only, I think, have 12 meeting days. So if you miss more than 2 lab periods, you will be withdrawn from this course unless you're communicating with me. So make sure you communicate if you have any issues or any unusual circumstances. I'll show you in a second, but I have all the lab assignments and everything available to you well ahead of time, and you have at least 3 weeks to complete everything. So because you have 3 weeks to complete everything, I don't accept any late work. So just make sure you have your due dates marked down and know that they're firm. So this is telling you what's on each lab exam and the lab exam date, so make sure you go ahead and make note of that now. The cumulative final, because we take it only a week after you take your last lab exam, it will not include the material from lab exam 4. The cumulative final will only include the material from lab exams 1 through 3, which are labs 1 through 14. I do have on here, because I want you to be aware that the information that's in your lab report, not the specific details, but what the lab report was about, will also appear on your lab exams. Academic honesty, basically, don't cheat. The rest of this information you can go in and read. I'm required to put it in there per HCC. Okay, the other thing I want to walk you through is our course schedule. Okay, so I have it divided by meeting date. Because it's hybrid, some of the stuff you will need to complete on your own outside of class, just because we won't have enough time. So our first meeting date, which is January 13th, our goal is to cover Lab 1 and Lab 2. The labs are written for an online course, so even if we don't have time or we run out of time in class, you can still go home and use the online links or any resources I've given you within the lab to finish the lab later. This is just the goal of what we plan to get completed during our meeting time. But you have all the resources you need if you're unable to complete it. If you miss a lab period, you don't need to reach out to me to ask me what we did. This is exactly what we did during that lab period. All you need to do is go in, open up the lab itself, and complete it like it was an online lab. So all of the assignments for all the lab exams, meaning basically all the lab submissions or any lab reports, if there were any for that lab exam module, they're always going to be due the Sunday night before our lab exam at 11:59 p.m. So like I said, you have plenty of time, at least 3 weeks, to get everything done, which is why there's no late work. So like I mentioned, we don't have a whole lot of meetings because the weird Monday class. So we meet next week on Monday, January 13th, then we don't meet again on the 20th because it's MLK Day. And we're closed March 3rd because of the Strawberry Festival, and then we have spring break. I did my best, if you're in the hybrid lecture class, to not have your lab exams fall on the same day as your lecture exams. I think the only exception is where you have lab exam 4, or the cumulative final on April 28th. I think you have your last lecture exam that same day. But other than that, I don't think you have any exams that are on the same day. Okay, just in case you want to get started ahead of time, because like I said, the labs are set up so that you can work at home. How it looks is you click on the link for the lab. That's not the actual lab itself, but it's going to contain the materials that you need for the lab. So a lot of times I have a introduction or some sort of background information document in there. The specifics in this document aren't going to be tested on your lab exam. What's going to be tested on your lab exam is what's actually in your lab. I still recommend that you read through the introduction or the background document if there's one available for that lab, because it's going to help you a lot with completing your lab. And also, if you're not taking this course at the same time as the lecture, it kind of gives you the information needed as a refresher in order for you to be successful in the lab itself. So the lab is always going to be in a Word document, so you can pull that up, and it's Word. So you have a couple of options here. You can bring your computer to lab and download the Word document and type directly into it, and then submit the Word document to the lab submission for your assignment. You can print it out, handwrite on it, take pictures of it, and upload it to the assignment. Or a lot of students like to take the Word document, convert it to a PDF, and use their iPad to use some sort of app to draw or insert images. So you have flexibility here. It doesn't have to be done in any format. Just once you complete it, make sure you upload it in order to get your assignment points for it. So here's our first lab, which is blood composition, which we will be completing. I gave you a link to a digital histology atlas where you can go in and look at a blood smear, and your goal is to be able to identify all the different types of formed elements that can be found in a blood smear. So you can either, over here on the right hand column, you can either sketch an image of what this particular cell looks like. You can take an image you find off of the internet or from the digital atlas that I gave you a link to, and embed it in there. I mean, you have, like I said, you have flexibility. But what your goal is basically to write a characteristic or write a description of this cell. Do not Google a description of it because that's not helpful. What you want to do is write your description of what you think the cell looks like so that you're able to identify it if you see an image of it on a lab exam or a way that you were able to tell it. So for example, erythrocytes are red blood cells. When you look at a blood smear, it's the only one that stains red. So you could even just put as your description red circles. That's totally fine. It's your description, not a textbook description. When we hit our 5 types of leukocytes, they all stain purple, so that's not really helpful in a description. The way you can tell the 5 different leukocytes apart are by the nuclei. So for example, neutrophils have lobed nuclei, and neutrophils are going to have 3 or more lobes. And I'll explain more in class, but again, if you want to get started ahead of time, you're welcome to. You can read that introduction and background and go ahead and get started. So then you would write 3 or more lobes as your description for neutrophils and embed an image there that you found on the internet or from the atlas of what the cell looks like. Also, like for example, eosinophils, they also have lobes, but you know it's an eosinophil if it has 2 lobes. So if you only see 2 lobes in the nuclei, it's 100% an eosinophil. If you see 3 or more lobes in the nuclei, it's 100% going to be a neutrophil. So that's what things that I would write down as a characteristic or description so that I could identify this cell on a lab exam. Your description may be totally different. So again, it's your description of what you things look like anytime you see that column in any lab. There's always some other things which I'll explain more. A lot of times you might see me embed an image in here. So for example, there's nothing for you to do in this table, but it's still in your lab. There's a reason why it's in your lab because this is possible exam material. So anything in this lab can be tested on your lab exam. I didn't really want you to have to go in and search because I wanted this specific amount of information for you to know. I didn't want you to Google it and put in, too much information or too little information. So an example of how you could see this information tested on exam is you don't need to memorize specific values, which I'll tell you when we meet and we talk about these labs in class. But for example, what it's showing you right here are the normal percent values that you find the different leukocytes in the blood of a healthy person. So you could be asked a question on a lab exam. If you see an elevated level of monocytes in a patient's blood, what could that indicate? Well, this table is telling you it could indicate that the patient has malaria, TB, or some sort of fungal infection. And if you notice here, elevated levels of these 5 different leukocytes indicate 5 different things. They're not all the same. So kind of be aware of what elevated levels of these could mean. And that's it for lab 1. So this lab, even if you did it at home, it might take you an hour. Our lab period's in, 2.5 hours. So we have plenty of time in lab. The only thing I was concerned about a little bit is when we get to the dissections. So we do the heart dissections and we work with the fetal pig a lot, dissections and looking at the different organ systems. That could be more time consuming. So you still have your online resources or provide you where the link that I provide you with has images of the fetal pig that's already dissected with labeled structures and organs. So there are helpful things in here. There's an exam 1 questions discussion board that you can see right here. So anytime you're working on anything, if you come across any sort of question and you don't want to wait till our next meeting, you are welcome to go in and post it there. I'll do my best to check it regularly. If you're a student and you see a question there that you know the answer to, or know a resourceful website or video, you are welcome to respond. So we can use that kind of like as a platform for questions or any helpful resources that you may come across. Okay, so I hope this was helpful in getting you started, since again, we're not meeting this week and you can start working ahead of time. When we do meet on our first meeting, just make sure that you have a lab coat. You can Amazon a white long sleeve lab coat, and no, it doesn't have to be white. It can be whatever color you want. Or the bookstore at HCC also sells them, but I know they have weird hours. So if you're not there while they're open, or you're not getting to campus in time for that, you may want to just get one off of Amazon. They're not very expensive. Okay, I'll see you all on Monday.